Welcome to the Mind Solution podcast with Sara Maude. The Mind Solution podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mind Solution podcast, where today I am joined by Tina Lifford. And Tina is an American actress and playwright who has just finished Series 7 playing Aunt Vi on Queen Sugar, which I understand is the Oprah Winfrey's network hit television show. So huge excitement around that. Tina's also the author of the little book of Big Lies and CEO of the Inner Fitness Project. So welcome to the show, Tina.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate your graciousness.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing where the conversation takes us and having a very connected conversation, because I understand, having read your book, The Little Book of Big Lies, that health and well-being is something which I get a sense you've been passionate about for a very long time. And I'd love you to just share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I step into the conversation of well-being actually because of a 5th grade trauma that happened on stage. Now, you in your introduction, you mentioned that I'm an actress. I knew that I wanted to be an actress back in the 2nd grade, right? And then in the 5th grade, I had this traumatic experience on stage where at 10 o'clock in the morning, I discovered that I was going to be number 1 in the talent show that had been the talk of the school for weeks. I signed up to be a part of the talent show. What I wasn't prepared for was looking at the roster and seeing my name be number 1. And for whatever the reason, that created a inside of me. And that happened at 10 a.m. So by time the actual talent show started at 1 p.m., that literally, the losing of my breath had taken over my entire being. And I stepped on that stage. I got out, I was singing old John Henry. I got out the first 2 bars, and then I froze. And I froze so completely that after what felt like an eternity of the pianist trying to help me find my way, my teacher literally had to come to center stage and pick me up and take me off the stage. I couldn't move. And, we know by now from the wonderful work that's being done in neuroscience that there's that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism that happens to us when we are afraid or when we are in survival mode. Mm-hmm. And that experience gave me such a thorough and complete understanding of how neurologically we get hijacked when we are in fear or in survival mode. And because acting was something, as I said, I knew I wanted to do back in the 2nd grade, I had 2 choices: figure this thing out or let go of that dream. And I couldn't let go of the dream. And now, all these decades later, I am so clear and thankful for those terrifying moments on stage, because they have instructed and informed and guided my every step. And me working inside of myself to understand myself at such a deep and honest level has helped me to rewire that trauma, to understand it, and best of all, to be a resource for people who are wanting to have the same level of skill and possibility around the things that have them frozen in their lives or running in their lives.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I would say over the last 12 years, one of the things that I've helped people with more than anything is a fear of public speaking. And whether that's somebody that's a 20-year-old at university that's suddenly got to start doing presentations about biology, or whether it's a chief exec who, you know, is running multi-million, billion-dollar companies, but the idea of having to do a town hall or a conference, they're just going to pieces. And I think what I love is helping them to understand what's creating their experience, because their brain, as you said with neuroscience, their brain goes, it's because I'm on stage, it's because of the public speaking. And when you're able to really strip that back and explain what's happened, it's just a trauma that's then set off all these thoughts and meanings and beliefs, and that's just temporary, that can be changed. Like, that can be so profound for people, can't it?
Yeah, you know, that simple statement, that can be changed, that you just made, that can be changed. That is the piece that is so easily lost when we are in the midst of whatever that trauma, whatever that neurological overwhelm is. We literally, as you know, we literally become locked in the lowest part of our brain. So there's no thinking happening. And for us to be able to, in those moments, hold on to the ability to think or to access a higher region of the brain or consciousness, that is what they call, for me at the Inner Fitness Project, that's what I call the effort, you know, and the work, you know, you can say tomato, tomato. I tend to focus on the effort required as opposed to just the work, because the work can sound so overwhelming, but there's very clear effort that has to be made in order for us to hold on to ourselves in the midst of uncertainty and fear and all the other, what I call surviving self-characteristics that are designed to hijack our focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about the statement that this can change, because I know from my own experience of coaching and working with people one-to-one, they're often somebody who has been in this place of suffering, whatever that looks like, you know, whether that's a lack of self-esteem, whether it's trauma, whether it's anxiety, depression, you know, whatever the situation is. And they've usually remained in that situation to the point where it's just got so painful to stay there that they almost kind of didn't have a choice other than, I've got to do something about it. But I know, like, I've worked with people that have been in this place of suffering for like 20, 30 years in some case. And then they've seen somebody like you, they've seen somebody like me or similar, and they've just had this huge insight. They've seen something that they've never seen before. They've seen that it's possible to change, that this isn't me. This is just a big story that, like you as an actress, they've just been playing a big story for a number of seasons. And when the change starts to happen, they're like, oh, why did I not reach out and get help before? And as a therapist, I'm like, I don't know. Trauma, you can bang trauma on the head like that. It's so frustrating and beautiful at the same time, playing our kind of position. But I'd love to hear more about the kind of people that you've helped, who you maybe found have kind of clung on to all of that pain and suffering, made some assumptions that this is me, this is my personality, I'm born this way, or whatever.
Well, in all fairness, our world hasn't been in this enlightening conversation for very long, right? The information that you and I are operating from, it's only now going mainstream. The fact that you and I can be in this conversation actually says that we were investigating ourselves before it was mainstream, in order to actually have the understanding and be able to articulate and support in an effective and successful way. I will tell you that I so agree with you that in working with clients, and I work with CEOs and presidents of major corporations, as well as quote unquote everyday people. And the thing that I love about that range is that when it comes to the internal experience, it's all the same. When it comes to the internal experience, the details change, the stories change, but the emotional experience is the same. The experience of being locked in a small part of yourself, so locked that you literally have come to believe, like with a shrug of the shoulders, that this is who you are and this is how it's going to be forever. And the best that we can do is try to suffer through. One of the big, light bulbs that you talked about that happened for me was I was in a spiritual psychology course, and I heard the phrase "up until now and from this point forward." And you talk about exploding, my mind just literally exploded, because it's such a simple and elegant truth. And when you hit on truth, it is usually simple and elegant. And up until now allows every single human being, no matter what the trauma is or has been, or how long they've been suffering, when you hear the notion, you don't even have to embody it yet. When you hear the notion that that's how it has been up until now, but from this point forward, it can change for the better. And I invite people to begin to use that phrase wherever their habits or limitations and old ways of being have them held hostage. Well, up until now, that's how I've thought. But from this point forward, it can change for the better. Well, up until now, I have seen myself that way. Or up until now, I've been one who was defensive and reactive. But from this point forward, it can change for the better. And every single time I say it, and when I work with people, there's always in the heart, you can feel it. You can feel it somewhere around the heart region. There is a relaxing that happens. Now, it might be just a minuscule thing for some, and for others, just a huge, like, a breath of possibility, a breath of, there is room for me inside of this experience. And that's what we want. That's what we're looking for, whether we know it or not.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word earlier, conscious. And it feels like the more that we can point people towards what is possible, this quantum world that we operate in, and point them to that possibility and get them, I think consciousness is something it's not like, oh, I'm conscious. Oh, I can tick that off my to-do list and I can go and take the dog for a walk now. It's like constantly evolving journey that we're on, that, as we know, consciousness has no limitation. So there's no limit to how evolved and conscious that we become. But I guess, part of that journey in stopping people from living those behaviors or limitations, getting stuck in that story, requires a level of self-awareness. And we know that, there are people that are operating in the world that are very unaware, including chief execs, that, they might have all this responsibility and people reporting into them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are self-aware. So I'd love to know from your experience, if somebody was listening to this podcast and was kind of questioning, I don't know, maybe I don't need to change, maybe I'm okay. What kind of things would you say or guide them towards to start that journey of self-awareness?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, Sarah. I love the question, because it is the intention, the primary intention of the Inner Fitness Project. My work is about acknowledging and then intentionally caring for the self with a capital S. And so often when we think about ourselves, a lot of people look in the mirror and self is just this monolithic thing. But at the Inner Fitness Project, through a number of things, including a dream that I had, we work with a frame that helps one begin to see themselves in new ways, see unconscious behavior, because what you can see, you can actually change. So we use this frame called self, the surviving self, the thriving self, and the infinite self. Now, there's not three selves in us. We are, as you said, infinite beings. We have the nature of the universe inside of us. So we have the capacity to constantly grow and expand. And if we are living our lives aligned with the nature of the universe, then we are always growing and expanding. So the idea of the three selves helps you to begin to see this range of thinking, feeling, and beliefs that live inside. When we are in the surviving self, and every single one of us lives there, a piece of science that I think is so important that everyone know is we think somewhere between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of that thinking is negative. 95% of that thinking is repetitive. Now, when you understand the building of the brain, right? the reptilian brain with the amygdala and like the first brain, it very much represents all of the characteristics needed for survival. So that fight, flight, or freeze, that looking for what's wrong, you can go walk into a room. I know we have all experienced walking into a room and having, a number of people smile and appreciate us and welcome us. But the one person that doesn't is the person that winds up taking up a lot of space in our heads. And that's because we are built to look for the danger. We are built to suss out and search for problems. So if we are just living out of the surviving self, then we are going to be hijacked by that neurological tendency and being at war, othering, judging, all of those characteristics that do lead to suffering are absolutely part of our survival mechanism. And now we know through, brain science that the frontal cortex is the executive center. And in our frame and model, that represents the thriving self, because it is from that executive center that you can actually choose the thinking and the feelings and beliefs that align with thriving. So when you can be in a situation and access a sense of possibility, which is what up until now and from this point forward does for you, when you are in a situation and you train yourself, the Inner Fitness Project recognizes that all of this takes effort and work. So when you train yourself to understand that the thriving self has within it the power to relax the surviving self and give more access of self to the narrow focus that the surviving self operates from, now we have more access to ourselves in general. So setting intentions, having a sense of hope. I call it, bodacious and audacious hope. Hope is a very powerful internal neurological event. And it's not just this airy-fairy, this feels good experience. Hope opens us up. Hope gives us more access to our thinking. It allows us to imagine. It actually calms. So for us to be able to be in a situation and dare to envision ourselves beyond that situation is the building of that, the thriving self, we call it, but the building of our ability to make executive decisions and take our power back from the surviving self. And then with the infinite self is just, it literally is that unmovable part of us that is connected to everything. Whatever that intelligence is that is behind life and makes this whole thing possible, we have that inside of us. And we know it and we access it periodically. I mean, for me, when I'm laying on the beach sometimes and the sun is beaming down on me and my eyes are closed, this form, my body, disappears. But my being literally is more alive. And I almost feel like I spread out, beyond the body into more of life. And, every human being who has ever desired peace or desired more joy, those people can desire, because there's a part of us, our very most fundamental part, that knows that that's where we come from. We come from a place of stillness. We come from a place that is at home in what, an observing person would say is chaos. We can be at home in our beings as we begin to understand that our starting place is not these bodies. We started long before our mother and father came together. And so for us to expand our idea of ourselves helps us to bring those realizations to the present moment when we need them most, when we are in that fight, flight, or freeze, or we have, for whatever the reason, fallen out of alignment with the truth of our being.
And it's exactly that, as you say, that our true nature, the truth of who we really are, is this infinite being. It's just this energy being that's been housed in this physical body. And one of the observations that I've made from working with organizations, and you might be familiar with this, but a lot of organizations are very focused on inclusion and belonging. So like in the past, it used to be equality and diversity. Now it's about inclusion and belonging. And yet my sense is that where we've created so many labels about, this is who I am, that I see more division happening rather than collection. And it feels like there's a real opportunity here that if organizations and the people, the living entity that makes that organization really understood who we really are, that's going to create far more of a profound transformation in bringing people together at that collective level than perhaps some of the inclusion and belonging initiatives that are out there in the corporate world. But I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And, there's a saying of mine that went viral years ago, and it's still out there. When you know yourself, you are empowered. When you accept yourself, you are invincible. And what that means is, at least at the Inner Fitness Project, we encourage focus on yourself, not that selfish, self-centeredness that people call selfish, but that range of self that I just talked about in terms of the surviving, thriving, and infinite. When we focus on ourselves, when we become honest and authentic with ourselves, when we begin to tell ourselves the truth, I have these 14 practices for inner health and well-being. And practice number 4 is I look for and transform the beliefs, patterns, and judgments I practice that limit my life. And I bring that up here because when we focus on ourselves honestly, we include the world, because we all are operating in the same way, not in the details, but in the dance with the ego, in the dance with fear around uncertainty, in the need to be seen and recognized. We share the human experience in those ways. So to the degree that we become honest with ourselves, that we can have meaningful conversations that dip below the narrative that we've been telling ourselves, below the stories that we cling to and the ones that we avoid, to the degree that we can be in that kind of relationship with ourselves, we bring the benefit of that into the workplace. And so we can be in a moment of dis-ease or uncertainty or war, conflict, and have a meaningful conversation because we've learned to do that with ourselves. And because we've learned that, most of the time, the conflict is rooted in individual stories, and those stories always harken back in some degree to being acknowledged and feeling worthy. So if we can know that about ourselves, then we can have more patience, more empathy and compassion. Those are all thriving self characteristics. Those are all characteristics that we can access because of that higher thinking region, of the frontal cortex. And that higher consciousness allows us to be conscious in the moment. My hope for us moving forward is that the idea of inner fitness, where we are using what we've learned from the importance and the effort required around our physical fitness. We all, whether you're a couch potato or not, whether you are choosing to be a couch potato or not, we all know and walk with the knowledge of physical fitness and its requirements and why it is important. And so when we are making a choice to sit on the couch and not take a walk, to sit on the couch and not exercise our body, there's a part of us that can make that choice consciously, because we know that should it lead to a point of, dysfunction or become problematic, we can choose to go take that walk. Right this moment in our society, we don't have a mainstream understanding of the need, well, first, the acknowledgement of self, the self that lives inside of us, that represents our entire experience. We don't realize that that is a part that requires our quality time and attention. And we don't know, as we started this wonderful conversation, we don't know that we have the power to change. And we don't know the importance of changing so that we don't have to carry hidden from the world, that never let them see you sweat dance that most of humanity is doing. Well, what we don't know about that dance is it looks nice and calm on the outside, but on the inside, it is doing damage to our sense of self. Because if we're dancing, if we're having to lie, if we're having to pretend, at the deepest level, there is a rejection or a non-acceptance of self, right? And that gets more deeply embedded as we play for the world. So it's really important for us to understand the interior space is the source of all the things we most want. And then to have a mainstream understanding that, the brain, science says that the brain has plasticity, which means it can change and adapt, which means wire and rewire itself to the end of our lives. So we can, if you've been dealing with something for 50 years, it doesn't matter. You have a brain. You have a thriving center that is wired to actually agree with new thoughts and help you establish new behavior. That's exciting.
Oh, absolutely. And it feels from what you're saying that I think the work that you do at the Inner Fitness Project and what we do here with the Mind Solution are very much aligned in that we're kind of almost taking this topic of well-being, especially well-being in the workplace, to the next dimension. We're talking about something that I've started certainly talking more about is spirituality in business, which normally that kind of is a sentence where people would kind of go, spirituality in business. But as I was having a conversation on the last podcast with Coach Dominic Scafidi, we were saying that actually spirituality is already in business in the fact that we are infinite beings. We're already infinite beings. And we've got words like energy and creation and connection and essence, the essence of our brand. We're already talking about it, maybe not in the way that you and I might talk about spirituality, but it's like it's there. And it feels like where, certainly from my observations, I think well-being in the workplace and mental health in the workplace has come more under the spotlight in the last 10 years. The organizations, their idea of well-being was, maybe you need to take a walk, stay hydrated, get good sleep, sleep hygiene, take breaks, the kind of what I might refer to as the basics, which, yes, if we do them, we're going to feel better for it. But it now feels from our conversation that we're ready to take that next leap, and that actually, if we want to create real transformation in the workplace, because mental health rates are going through the roof, organizations are full of people that are burnt out, they're suffering, that we need to give them more than just the basic well-being package. And it feels from what you're saying that this is kind of like the missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. And I feel incredibly honored to be, alive and skilled at this time in the evolution of humanity, because there is a need and there's a listening for the conversation that wasn't present to the degree that it is right this moment, pre-COVID, right? And so the idea that we can use words like spirituality, but more importantly, the idea that we can actually begin to frame, concepts and frame teams and work spaces around the idea of bringing your full self. And if you are bringing your full self, then it makes sense that organizations would invest in what that looks like and helping people become more conscious. Because if they become more conscious, they're going to bring the thriving self to the workplace. They're going to bring the part of themselves that can actually, seek creatively, speak in terms of intentionality, conversate in a way that allows for a expanding understanding of the conversation. These are skills that will benefit our humanity. And your work and the work of, those of us in this space. What I love about this is inner fitness for me is really sort of an umbrella in the same way that physical fitness is an umbrella. And underneath, there are multiple ways to access and learn about and strengthen the parts of self that help you thrive. You don't have to come to the Inner Fitness Project to do that. There are wonderful people, the work that you're doing, Sara, the work that, some of the people that we admire are doing. All of that is ultimately about strengthening one's inner fitness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when we look at organizations, I think, again, this is only from my own personal observations, is where there's been this focus on well-being and mental health, particularly since COVID. Our intention is about helping organizations understand that, bringing somebody to work that's in that place of thriving isn't just about, reducing absence, improving retention, employee engagement, all the kind of sort of more traditional HR measurements, if you like. But a conversation that I had with a very dear friend of mine last week, she'd been on a 2-day strategy event with her HR team. And I called her and I said, "Oh, how did it go?" And she was like, "Oh, it was awful." I was like, "Oh, really?" I said, what was going on? And she said, "Well, we just went over the same old ground. We didn't come out with any strategic ideas." And she said there was such tension in the room, and she's quite intuitive herself. She could really see the sort of conflict between two team members. And yet they'd stayed in this room for kind of like 2 days, almost sort of like, we're not going to leave here until we come out with these strategic, creative ideas. And the quality of those ideas, like they weren't there. But where I see you and I and people, as you say, that work in this space can really shine a light is helping business leaders to read the room. And yeah, okay, you can read the room based on body language, but what we're pointing to is that we are more than these physical bodies, to be able to read the energy in the room, this invisible force that's connecting us, and to kind of be able to tune in and go, what's the vibe? I mean, we hear that in the corporate world, what's the vibe in here? And if they can't pick that up, if they're quite closed off to it, then they're just going to keep coming out with, it's like a sausage machine. They'll just keep coming out with the same things. But what we're talking about is that ability to raise the energy, raise the vibration, get everybody on the same creative page, so that actually what they're coming out with, whether it's innovative, creative, strategic, is going to have far more impact than how things have been done. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's beautiful. I mean, it is that requires something that humanity can use a lot of, and that is, it requires being present and and telling yourself the truth, and then speaking to the elephant in the room. Right? And because we have been taught this never let them see you sweat stuff, this facade, right? People show up with their facade face. But when people experience permission to tell the truth, and then we begin to do the work that helps each person understand that what we see, is to be able to assess the difference between a personal truth and need and a universal truth. And when you show up understanding the difference between a personal truth, like I believe that when you do this, this, or this, it is XYZ. It's disrespectful. It is unconscious. It's whatever my labels are, because that's my frame, because that's what's important to me, because that's how I grew up. It's because that is where my work and wounds live. And if I don't have the ability to see that that is personal, and then I make it global, then I experience that everywhere I go, because that's where I'm going. And just helping people to know the difference between the personal and the global or universal, and giving people, I know you have experienced the fun. It's an odd kind of fun, but it's fun to be in a room where people are like crashing into beliefs that they have held on to as though they were universal, only to discover, oh my gosh, that's just me. That's just me. And how I know you know the pot roast story of how the mother has, cooked a pot roast, or throughout generations that the pot roast was cooked by chopping off the end of the pot roast and putting it in the pan.
Oh yeah.
Right? Right. You know that one, right? And then the husband who's been watching this, through the mother and the grandmother and his wife is like, why do you do that? Why do you chop it off? And the upshot of the story is, well, I do it because that's how my mother did it. But that's not universal. And for us to discover, because for me, it's like the 4th of July, to discover that, oh my God, the way in which I am seeing this, the way in which I am responding, that seems so rooted and real and aligned, is a personal experience. And if I am curious and step into a universal conversation with you, what do we discover?
And it's, when I think back, my background was human resources. So I worked as an HR practitioner in the corporate world for the likes of British Airways and Virgin Atlantic and Carnival UK. And it's that thinking about, if I'd known what I know now and what we teach, if I'd known that 12 years ago throughout my career, what difference that would have made to how I show up. And it's not about us being these kind of evangelical beings going, we never get pissed off. Of course, we get this, but we just don't let it swamp us in the way that, I could have been angry. Somebody could have said something to me at work, and I might have still been chewing on that bone for a good 3 or 4 days.
or years.
Yeah.
Or years.
This thing my manager said 10 years ago. And so I just think it's, as you said, it's such an exciting and profound time to be a teacher and sharing this wisdom in this space, that this isn't just about having good mental health. This isn't about resilience. This is about so much more, and helping people to understand, as we've talked about, the nature of who we are and what's really creating those experiences from the inside out. That it's like, an email can't make you angry. I don't think Google have developed that kind of technology yet. I don't think WhatsApp can really pick you off. I don't think they've developed that. I mean, with AI, maybe something's possible, but helping people to understand what's really creating their experience, so that they can also own that and take accountability. So they can't go, well, I feel like this because of this, and this happened. It's such an empowering place to be, and such an opportunity for real lasting transformation.
When fun becomes the experience of seeing your challenge as your opportunity to expand. It's like, that's fun that we have not been taught, but it's fun that is exciting and rewarding and empowering and emboldening to all of a sudden realize, oh, I'm upset because, right? I'm upset because you did this, or I'm upset because you did that. For us to realize that every single upset is the thriving self identifying the path down which we can put our attention and access more self. It's exciting, right? So that I don't have to, 10 years from now, still be talking about I'm upset because I've taken that awareness that upset gave me, that awareness that this moment of friction gave me, and I used it to get curious, thriving self-characteristic, to get curious about why that makes, or not why, but what is behind that level of reaction from me. And then I discover, oh, that level of reaction is because when I was growing up, my mom or my, teacher or whatever always did X, Y, and Z. And I always felt smaller or shoved into a corner or whatever. And now that this moment has given me the gift for that aha, I can take that aha and I can begin to work with it and bring more of myself onto the table.
Yeah. And it's true that if we are able to look at it as an opportunity for growth, it's like, for anybody listening, I want to say, you're not broken. You're not broken and you don't need fixing. But, these experiences, whether they're pain, suffering, hurt, guilt, jealousy, anger, just kind of lets us know what goggles we have on. What are the glasses that we're wearing? And if this is something that's a repetitive pattern, it's like, okay, what's here for me? What is here in this moment? What can this teach me that can, as you say, allow more of our true self, our expanded nature to kind of burst through, a bit like a butterfly bursting through a catalyst, and to experience the kind of joy and contentment and satisfaction and happiness that so many people long for and are looking for in all the wrong places.
Yeah. I love the notion that we are all offspring of the Big Bang. We're all offsprings of a phenomena that is constantly expanding. And everything that was experienced or that we can witness or know about the universe, and how, it can collide into, the earth was born through a collision, the moon was born through a collision, the sun was born through elements swirling around and coming together. This thing called life is full of that swirling energy. And the more we know ourselves, when we bump into life being life, we get to allow it, consciously decide and wire it for good.
No, absolutely. We're just cosmic stardust.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And Sarah, what's beautiful about that is if we begin to, if that sounds airy-fairy to some listeners, you can throw away the airy-fairy part. But if we begin with the notion that we are more than we know, that's something that the brain, that the subconscious can agree to. We are more than we know. We have more assets, we have more power, we have more characteristics and skills, potentiality. We are more. And if we start to invite that idea to the forefront, we become less afraid of dying. We become less afraid of rejection. We become less afraid of the things that have defined us in that little space called the surviving self.
And I think what I love as well about this whole topic about spirituality and thinking about spirituality in business is you can either see it as a little bit out there, but it's so rooted in science and quantum physics that it's like you can go with the woo-woo version, and if you want to dance with the woo-woo version, I can do the tango with you. But equally, if you want to know more about quantum physics and quantum mechanics, I'm like, bring it on, mate. I love this kind of stuff. So it's not like we're talking about spirituality. It doesn't have to be this kind of she's trying to foster some kind of beliefs onto us. It is, as you say, it's like the whole, where did life get created from in the first place? And we can't argue with that.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. And, whether you experienced it in a team setting, in a home setting, or wherever, when two or more people begin to leave room for something more than just their idea, that the whole, I love the whole, just throwing ideas out there with the intention of discovery, because that is such a pure experience of creativity in motion, of an idea that is waiting to be discovered, an idea that is waiting to go to be your aha moment. And the only way we can get there is if there are people in the space who are curious and interested in what can fill this space or this intention or this idea beyond what we know right this moment. That's spirituality. That's creativity. And that's how we all are living our lives when we are having the best experience.
Yeah. One final question, because I'm aware that we could probably carry on.
We could.
Talking for hours and hours and hours.
We could.
something that you've mentioned a couple of times, Tina, is this word intention, and either what we intend for ourselves or the ideas. And I know this is a word which I think people kind of understand, but also are a bit like, if I want to create an intention for myself, there's a little bit of head scratching that sometimes goes on, and they're not sure, what does that mean to create an intention? I'd love for you to share your thoughts about intention creation.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, intention is the gift of being able to having the permission to envision and dream without necessarily having the delivery system, but recognizing that because we are spiritual beings, because we are wired in a way that like the best Google search engine in the world, if you type in what it is you want, what you're looking for, that search engine is going to factor back answers for you. So when we set an intention, which means just literally stating for yourself, and I believe that stating it out loud is powerful, because when you state it out loud, you actually engage your own listening. You engage your subconscious. You are listening to yourself and actually speaking to yourself at the same time. And you simply state what you would like, how you want to be, how you want to go into this room, the value that you want to create, the value that you want to become, the information that you want to own and learn, whatever, however you want to be in the most satisfying version of yourself. You set that as an intention, like, I want to be a person who can add value to any and every room. That's an intention. And now, with that stated, there is this system that is beyond us that begins to move us in ways that connects us with the information, with the people, with the aha moments, with the realizations that help that idea fulfill itself. And if we dare to embrace and then effort to embody the notion that the infinite self is our connection to the very intelligence of the universe, then that helps us to understand that nothing is out of our reach. Anything that we ask for, and I don't mean making the universe an ATM machine, but right? But anything that we...
But it could be.
Yeah, it could be. But anything that we can envision. If you can envision freedom from a challenge that has, held you down for decades, then you set your intention by simply saying, I set the intention to be free of this. How can I be free of this? And you've just now typed into the universal search engine a question that universe, your universe, our universe, is now going to factor back answers. Keep your eyes open, because you'll find in the next conversation, or when you turn on the television or the radio or a podcast, you will be receiving answers that help you become the very thing that you intend.
Well, I intend for this podcast episode to go viral.
Yes.
I intend, Brené Brown and Dr. Joe Dispenza, for you to be in the hot seat,
Yes.
like Tina, and join me. But that feels a beautiful, beautiful place, Tina. Thank you so much for an illuminating, connected conversation. And for people that are listening that want to find out more about the Inner Fitness Project, where's the best place for them to reach you, Tina?
Yeah, the innerfitnessproject.com. And, my book, The Little Book of Big Lies, was chosen by Forbes as a must read in 2021. And there's just so much information in that book if people are looking for answers.
Beautiful. Well, we trust that this has got your mind firing and wiring in new sequences, and we look forward to joining you again very soon on another episode of the Mind Solution podcast. So from us, have a wonderful day.